What's up, everyone? Jason Gilbo here with Chris Etherington, taking a look at some DraftKings picks for the U.S. Open. Finally, after a couple of tournaments over the last few weeks, we've been kind of gearing up for this one and soft pricing, but I don't feel like it's a bad thing. You and I were talking. It just seems like there's a lot of different ways you can go.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in a bit about the 7,000 range, but that's just one example where basically the ownership may just be spread out more for this week, just because there's a lot of different ways that a lot of people will go this week. For example, I think people are going to see that yardage book and they're just going to auto-click DJ and start their lineups from there.
Yeah, I'm with it. And obviously DJ comes in as the favorite. And, in terms of your core picks, you like Jordan Spieth, who, in terms of just playing over the last few months, Spieth really hasn't been a popular guy, and our pod hasn't been a popular guy in terms of playing outside of the tournaments where maybe he's one of the few guys in the field where you just kind of pay up for.
Yeah, I think the Spieth overall in the last couple of weeks, I think he found something with his game. If you look at his recent performance in his last two starts, he finished 2nd and 13th. So with that being said, I think he's basically found something with his driver. He's hitting fairways again. Outside of that, he's 2nd in birdie or better. He's 4th in GIR and 1st for proximity. With those three stats alone, I think he's going to be my number one guy for the start of making my lineups for the week.
And this is a week where, you can play a Spieth, you can play him with a Rahm or Garcia, and then move your way down. You can easily plug in two of these top guys and build a comfortable lineup.
Yeah, it does feel like that. A lot of people will pick two of their favorite guys up here, and then they'll probably go down around the 8,000 mark, and then just fill in the rest from there. As for me, I think DJ and Rahm is going to be the top two ownership for this week. They're very similar players. Rahm is the basically the rookie of the year for this year, and DJ is going to be the player of the year. But I think with those two players probably creeping up close to 30%, I'm just going to have to auto-fade those two. Yeah, and I really like Fowler for this week. He's 4th in birdie up better, 29th in GIR, 34th in proximity. And with the miscut from last week, I think his ownership will be down just a little bit. He's still going to be popular, but I really like Fowler, and I think Spieth and Fowler will be my top two options up here for this week.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I love Fowler. He's my number one guy in terms of a double-digit price tag. I'm kind of glad that he struggled a little bit last week. He'll probably jump his ownership down a couple percent, but you probably see him in 15-20% range, be my guess, maybe pushing a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say around at least 20%. If he didn't miss the cut and if he finished very well, say around top 20, then I think his ownership will be definitely in the top 3 for the week. But he did miss the cut. So I think probably around that 17 to 20% range, I think, for Fowler.
Right. I think given the fact that Rahm's right there, and Rahm's obviously always going to draw a lot of attention with just how well he's played. Let's start with Garcia, Day, McIlroy. McIlroy obviously hasn't played since the Players. You and I were just talking about him before we started. I probably won't be touching this week, but he'll be the lowest owned out of the big guys.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Like you said, Players was his last tournament. He finished 35th that week, and I believe he did say that week that he might have aggravated something with his previous injury with his ribs. So that might be why he had a 4 week off after the Players, just to rest up and get ready for the U.S. Open. So with that being said, I think of the top tier guys, McIlroy will definitely be the lowest owned at the top.
And are you playing any Sergio this week? I mean, I think I'll have a few shares, but I don't know how much I'll have of them outside of that.
I mean, you can't really play everyone up here, but I think Sergio is going to be popular, and playing the ownership angle at the top, I'm just going to have to fade Garcia as well as Rom and DJ.
Then we kind of get down here into 9,000 range. Justin Rose, Hideki Matsuyama, Hendrik Stenson, Brooks Koepka. These are guys where I think this is where you can start to make a little bit of movement and just saying, hey, I'm not going to play Fowler, I'm not going to play Spieth, I'm not going to play DJ, but maybe I'll lead off with a Rose or a Matsuyama or something like that.
Yeah, I think with your cash lineups, I think maybe starting off with Rose is a good play. I really like Rose this week. He's basically have one of the better stats relative to the field overall. He is 6th in birdie better, 16th in GIR, and right now he's basically average for proximity. He is 96th for that stat. And then when you look at he hasn't played that much recently. His last tournament was the BMW back over in Europe. He finished 12th that week. And then if you look at his track record at the U.S. Open, he does have his 2 missed cuts in the last 6 years. However, he did win the U.S. Open back in 2013. Being at 9,800, I think he might be overlooked. If I had to guess, his ownership, probably no more than 15%. And if that's the case, I'm going to be well overweight on Justin Rose for this week.
Yeah, I like Rose a lot. I think out of that group, I mean, I'm intrigued with Matsuyama. He's been kind of quiet. I mean, obviously since his last big outing was the Waste Management Open. But look, it's just been kind of a quiet season for him. Solid ball striker. So one of those things you and I were talking is just basically if the putter gets rolling, he could make some noise in this tournament.
Yeah, he like you said, he's one of the top ball strikers in the field. But just like Rose, he only played 2 tournaments in the last 6 weeks. His last tournament was the Memorial. He finished tied for 45th that week. When you look at his track record for the US Opens, he did miss a cut last year, but the 3 years before that, he finished 18th, 35th, and 10th. So he does know how to play on these type of courses. And I think, I think he's probably going to be maybe not the lowest owned in this range. I think Stinson would be the lowest owned. But I think Matsuyama would definitely be around that 12 to 15% mark.
Yeah, I think that's what I was looking at as well. I was kind of hoping for 12%. I'm completely fine with that. Adam Scott's a guy I like here. I mean, plays well in big tournaments. 8,800 just seems to be maybe 95, 94. I wasn't expecting below 9K, but good win player. I mean, 4 top 10s this year. I love him. I think he's always in play for especially these longer or these year tournaments.
Yeah, Scott has changed his schedule for this year. He's basically focusing around the majors. He has his old caddy, Steve Williams, on the bag. He had him on the bag last week, and he actually played quite well last week. He finished 10th. And he actually made all of his 4 cuts in the last 6 weeks. So he's on form. And I think a lot of people will see his price tag, and then he might be that probably the second highest, third highest type guy in ownership in this 8,000 range. I think a lot of people will see his recent play and they'll just gravitate towards him and go from there.
What about the rest of these 8K guys? I mean, there's not a ton in terms of actual overall plays. I mean, you got Paul Casey, Justin Thomas, Bubba Watson, Jason Duffner, Phil Mickelson, if he decides to roll in late. And, you know, I just kind of picture him like driving in all crazy, like flip over a sand trap and then like hop into the tee box and start going.
Yeah, I guess we could just talk about the elephant in the room. It's like what to do with Phil. He said last week that he needs basically a minimum of 4-hour delay. And look at the weather. And there's a slight chance that may happen, but his tee time is in the afternoon, and the lineup lock is 7:45 in the morning. So it's totally up to you whether you want to play Phil or not. As for me, he's way too risky to put into lineups, knowing that probably 95% certain that he's not going to play this week.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones where you have to be making a ton of lineups to even start throwing Phil into a couple.
Yeah, if you're one of those guys that play, you know, like a multi-entry, play 100, 150 lineups every week, sure, maybe put him in 1 or 2, but that's basically it. Just don't have too much exposure to the guy. He, like I said, 9 times out of 10, he's not going to play this week. He's said it last week, so he's not too worried about it. Yeah, for me personally, he's just way too risky.
Yeah. Anyone else in the 8K range that you want to talk about? You know, Bubba Watson, you and I were talking about him before. He's a guy that, yeah, sure, played really well, you know, at the Memorial, but outside of that, he's been awful this year.
Yeah, I think with the distance angle and with the fairways being more forgiving this week, I think a lot of people will gravitate towards Bubba. For me, I think I'm just going to go that $100 cheaper, go to Duffner with the win at the Memorial. He finally got that win after being so consistent this year. And then his stats are still one of the best. He's 17th in birdie or better. He's also 17th in proximity. He's 42nd in GIR. So I think Duffner will be in most of my cash lineups for this week.
And then we crack the 7K range where there are just numerous options. And moving down the list, I mean, I don't dislike Chappell. Snedeker's fine. Peters, Kuchar. I know you like Kuchar this week. He's in your core article on DFC. You know, all those names that I just said are all playable in terms of high sevens for me at least.
Yeah, this is where basically I think the ownership will spread out more evenly, just because there's just a lot of options to go around. For me personally, I do love Kuchar. It was between him and another guy we'll get to a little bit. But for Kuchar, I like how he's coming around. In his last 3 tournaments, he finished 4th, 12th, and 9th. And the tournament before that, he was an MDF. So with that being said, his stats are consistent as they come. He's 49th in GIR. He's 40th in proximity. And he's one of the best for avoiding bogeys. He's 14th ranked for this week. So, like I said in the article, par is your best friend for this week. And I think Kuchar makes that mold. And he's going to be in bulk of my lineups overall.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. Kevin Kistner's the guy I have some interest in at 7,500. Obviously he's been playing really well in the last 2 events. I mean, 6 and had the win. He's got 10 top 25s this year, 5th in strokes gained. I feel like he's a cheap guy. I feel like he's a safe option. I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with Kuchar or Kisner right in that mid-7s.
Yeah, Kisner is going to be one of those popular names that everyone knows because they've been watching him play a lot better recently with the win and then finishing 6th after that win. I think if I had to guess which one is going to be the most popular in this range, I think Kisner might be that guy. They're going to look at his stats and look at his last 2 starts. And when you look at his U.S. Open history, I mean, he finished 12th in 2015. And I believe that was the year that they were playing at Chambers Bay. And that seems to be the course that a lot of people are comparing to.
Mm.
So I think with that in mind, I can see Kisner being the top guy in this range.
Yeah, I mean, definitely good points there. I mean, in terms of ownership, I always think Louis, I mean, outside that one tournament where there was like nobody in terms of big names, he was extremely popular. I always feel like he's going to be more popular than he actually is. I don't know if this week's the case, but I would love it if he's somewhat lower owned, but probably not.
Yeah, I can sort of see that he might be overlooked. He hasn't played that much. His last tournament was the Byron Nelson, and he finished 18th. And then the tournament before that, he finished 2nd at the Players. So at 7,400, I mean, that's a really good value for a guy that has the upside to finish up there in the leaderboard and potentially win. If you look at his U.S. Open history, I mean, he was runner-up in 2015, again, Chambers Bay. And then he was 23rd last year as well. So for 7,400, he's just way too cheap, I think. He's just like Kuchar. I think he'll be one of the higher guys exposed in my player pool for this week.
So in terms of, you were talking about Kisner in terms of ownership in this range, another high probably ownership, and we just talk about in terms of buzz around other sites, Shane Lowry, 7,300. 2 straight top 10s at the U.S. Open. I mean, pretty solid stats, pretty solid all-around player. The course really fits him well. I think in terms of ownership, he's probably going to draw some just at that range as well.
Yeah, with his history at the U.S. Open, he finished basically inside the top 10 the last 2 years. It was 2nd last year to Dustin Johnson and 9th in 2015. There is a lot of buzz around him right now. I think him and Kisner will probably be the highest pairing in this range. I think people will just look at their history, the recent form. Is like if you look at Lowry's last tournament, he finished 15th at the Memorial, and then he finished 6th at the BMW before that. So yeah, him and Kisner will definitely be very popular.
I mean, if you're looking to make pivots, I don't think Brendan Steele or Vern Weisberg are bad pivots off of those names either in the low 7s.
Yeah, Steele is very interesting for this week. His stats overall are really good. I mean, he only played the U.S. Open twice in the last 6 years. He missed the cut in 2013, and he finished 15th last year. So at 7,100, I mean, he does have that upside to finish strong, but he also has that volatility during the U.S. Open where he might miss the cut. I believe the rule is like low 60s and ties will make the cut this week, and is a 150 plus player field. So I think Steele might be a really good tournament option. but he's just a little too risky for my liking.
Yeah. We got Francisco Molinari. He's a popular guy on our pod. We talk about him quite often. Really nice price tag on him. What about ownership for this guy? I mean, I think overall he's been really consistent in terms of scoring. I mean, 6th at the Players, 2nd at BMW, 24th at St. Jude. I mean, he's been finishing high.
Yeah, he's been playing very well this year. I've been playing him a lot recently, and if you just look at his history at the U.S. Opens, he didn't play last year, but I mean, the year before that, he has 3 top 30s. And his last 5 attempts. So, I mean, his stats are really up there in terms of the field. I mean, he's 12th in birdie or better, 40th in GIR. He's also 27th in strokes gained off the tee. So, with that being said, I think he might be a little popular, but probably no more than 12, 13%. Like I said before, I think in this range, it's going to be spread out more evenly.
Yeah, I think so too. You and I were talking before, and it just seemed like everyone might eat away at each other outside of really the few guys that we mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the 7,000 range, it kind of feels like just pick your poison, basically. Just pick the guys that you think will play well. And pair them up with the 2 guys that you like at the top, and then just go from there.
Anyone interested you below 7K? I mean, definitely some names down here. Anyone that you're really considering?
The one guy that I mentioned earlier is Bill Haas. He was the one guy that I was torn between him and Kuchar as like one of the last guys in my core for this week. Haas is really good stats wise overall, better than Kuchar's, but I think Kuchar is more consistent. And if you look at the odds, as of last week, I think it was, Kuchar was 50-1, and Haas was down at 150-1. So that's the only reason why I went with Kuchar. If it was reversed, I would have gone with Haas. They're very similar. They haven't won a major yet. You could play that narrative where this year might be the first timers for the majors. But going back to Haas, I think him being at 6,600 and with his U.S. Open track record, I mean, it's okay, but overall, I think at 6,600, you can't really go wrong with him. I think he's probably at least $1,000 cheaper than what he should be.
No, I definitely agree with you. Benoit Ann is a guy I'm intrigued with, 6,800. Hasn't missed a cut this year, 3 top 10s. I mean, 19th in par 4 birdies or better. I kind of like him here. I just don't know if I need to go down so low.
I mean, with the pricing that it is, you can easily pick 2 or even 3 guys down here that you love and just go stars and scrubs, basically.
Yeah.
But for On, I mean, he's made his last 4 cuts. And his best finish was at the Byron Nelson. He finished 5th that week. And his last tournament play was at the Memorial. He finished 25th. So at 6,800, he is another guy that has that upside to finish inside the top 5. With that being said, I think that is just a tremendous value, and he might be a nice tournament option for this week. He's not going to be too popular. A lot of people, I think, will go to possibly Glover below him and Westwood above him, and as well as Sink right there as well. I think those guys are going to be more popular than than On. So I think On might be a nice tournament option.
Yeah, in terms of the ownership play, I didn't really consider that. I was just looking more of him just being a guy, like you said, stars and scrubs. Mark Leishman's down there, 6,700. I'll consider him as well. I just think him and as you mentioned, the other two are just guys that are like, if I'm gonna load up a lineup up top and just play two 10K guys, like I'll definitely consider those guys. But in terms of balanced, I don't think they'll crack my like balanced lineups.
Yeah, I think Leishman and On are really good tournament options. And that being said, I think for tournaments, if you want to be unique, you could probably just go balance because a lot of people will start two guys above 10,000. But for cash, I think if you start, like I said, with Rose and go from there, I think that's a fine play for this week.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of who you got win this one, I mean, I know your picks already, but for the viewers, who you got as far as your top guy goes?
For my top guy, I think Rose is going to be the guy that I think will win this week. I just think that he's going to have that redemption from losing in a playoff to Garcia back at the Masters. Yeah, he's my pick to win at the top. And then my dark horse for this week is Molinari. Like I said, Molinari stats is definitely one of the best for the field for this week. And I just don't think a lot of people will go to him. But he might be that guy that will help that one player to win the $1 million with the million maker for this week.
Yeah, I like that. If I'm picking Ricky Fowler's my top guy, take a win. And then I like Louis as that dark horse guy.
Yeah, I like those two picks as well.
So, yeah, getting real wild with our picks there.
Yeah. They might be a little popular, but it is what it is.
Yeah. We're not going to go out and say, Ernie Els is going to go win the U.S. Open or someone crazy or something like that.
Yeah, if you want to be bold, it will say Phil is somehow going to show up and he's going to win. How's that?
Yeah. If I had to pick another one, I think Matsuyama would be my contrarian pick.
If I had to pick that one guy, and you know what? I think McIlroy might find something this week. I think he'll be my guy.
I like that, yeah. And usually any other week, McIlroy might not be contrarian, but this week in this tournament, he definitely is.
Exactly.
So let's wrap things up here with us. You can check out DaveFantasyCafe.com for all great tools and content. You can also check out Chris's article in his core over on DFC.com. So good luck this week, and we'll see you next week.